something. So now you had 6 airplanes in one division and 7 in another. And when we got there, our skipper, Tom Stetson, decided we were originally all assigned to attack the cruiser. He decided with the Yamato listing that he could take the Yamato. So he took his 6 airplanes and they changed the depth settings on the torpedoes, which were originally set for cruiser depth. And he went after the Yamato. And the 7 of us went after the cruiser Yahagi. And 5 of us were able to launch our torpedoes. 2 of them hung up and couldn't launch. And we got, all 5 of us got hits on it. And it immediately broke up and sank within 30 seconds after the 5th torpedo hit. And there were approximately 1,000 sailors on the ship, and there were less than 200 survivors.
And for that, you were awarded the Navy Cross.
I was awarded the Navy Cross.
And that is the highest decoration in the United States Navy.
That's the highest one the Navy gives out.
When you attacked the cruiser, was there heavy anti-aircraft fire?
Oh yes, the cruiser was putting out a lot of anti-aircraft. There was a destroyer alongside of it that was putting out a lot of anti-aircraft. And my position in the formation required me to be the first guy in the attack. And when I got the breakup signal from my section leader, Clyde Lee, I immediately headed towards the cruiser. I had instructed my radar operator, because I was concentrating on the target, to give me the range, which he was able to do on his radar screen, because I wanted to drop at about 2,000 yards.
2,000 yards from the ship? From
the ship.
Yeah.
The torpedo requires about 500 yards of water travel to arm. So by the time it reaches the water, it's traveled approximately halfway. And we had new torpedoes that we were able to use for the first time that had wooden noses and propellers, wooden noses and tails to give it stabilization through the air. So we were able to drop it at 500 feet and above, going very fast. And when the torpedo struck the water, the plywood nose and tail would just disappear off of it and would head right towards the target. Now I dropped my torpedo and I looked at the cruiser, and I was going too fast to make a turn without exposing myself for a very slow turn away from the cruiser and destroyer. So I decided the most judicious thing to do would be to put my nose down and just head right for the ship. And I flew over the bow at about 100 feet, almost ran into the mainmast. I could see people running around down there below. It was probably the most exciting 3 or 4 or 5 minutes that anyone can possibly imagine.
Indeed. There's a picture next to you. Why don't you hold up the picture? And that is...
If you want to hold it up a little higher, that'd be great.
This picture was taken aboard the Yorktown in 1945 in the cockpit of a torpedo bomber, TBM. And a lot of people are confused about the designation TBF and TBM. The original torpedo bomber was made by Grumman, and F is the designated letter in the Navy for Grumman. Then Grumman got the contract for making the Hellcat, so they couldn't make both airplanes on the same assembly line in Long Island. So they turned it over to General Motors, and that's why it became TBM. And there was almost 10,000 of them built before the war was over. And
how many in the crew?
There were 3 in the crew. Myself, of course, the pilot, and I had a rear gunner who faced aft just behind me, and a radio radar operator. And the British used the same airplane. In fact, that was one of the inspirations for my taking TBMs in the first place. Was a British pilot flew one into Barron Field in Pensacola about a week before I graduated, and I hadn't opted for the type of operational aircraft I was going to be involved with. And my buddy Grady Jean and I started talking to the pilot. We were just totally impressed by this magnificent airplane and what it could do. So we went into the officer in charge of assigning your operational aircraft and told him we wanted to go into torpedo bombers. And he was a fighter pilot, and he spent the next half an hour trying to talk us out of it. But he wasn't successful. We stuck to our guns, and Grady Jean was one of the pilots who eventually got a torpedo into the Yamato, which was sunk, and I was an eyewitness to the explosion of the Yamato a few minutes after the attack on the Yahagi, the cruiser. And the explosion was the most unbelievable thing that I've ever seen in my life. You've seen pictures of the atomic bomb. Well, this is exactly the same. The sky was blood red from horizon to horizon, and the ship it had almost 3,000 personnel on it, and there were less than 200 survivors. And the explosion was so loud, it was heard in Kyushu, 75 miles away. And that was the end of the pride of the Japanese Navy.
In this picture now, I'll ask you a couple questions about that. You're wearing your parachute, right?
I'm wearing the parachute I'm sitting on.
Oh, you're sitting on it.
Yeah, that's behind me is just a pad. That's all, just for comfort.
Okay.
But beneath me is a parachute and a life raft.
Okay.
That I sat on.
Okay.
We also had a huge life raft in the airplane, which could accommodate the crew. And if we had a ditch and make a water landing, we practiced removing the life raft from the airplane in the middle of the airplane and inflating it and so on and so forth. And any time that we made an attack anywhere in Japan on any of the airfields or installations, we always had rescue craft available, either submarines or what we call dumbos, which are flying boats like PBYs, and we would know in advance where they were located. So in case we had to go into the water, we could send out an SOS, and that's how George Bush got rescued. He got rescued by a submarine when he got shot down at Chichijima. And submarine picked him up and brought him back to the ship, and the rest is history, as they say.
Now, your cockpit is open there. Maybe explain to us how the cockpit worked or how you got up.
Well, there's a canopy which operates on two sides. It's not a single-piece canopy. So you could open one side and close the other, open one and close. I mean, it was very flexible. Taking off and landing, the canopy was always open.